As we talked more and more, I got a different understanding of this character maybe being like an artist. That one of the ways he'd survived this affliction was to make it into something beautiful, for all its horror, to make it into something that had a care and a concern in terms of his victims being remembered, at least, that they weren't just trashed and thrown away, that he saved things and carried around something of them. So Marin is a young woman who has the same affliction that I have. I'm a 60-year-old man, and I meet her at a bus station in a small Ohio or Kentucky. It was filmed in Kentucky, but I think it's Ohio. Well, they're very close anyway. And I meet her in the night when she's waiting for a Greyhound bus. And I know that she has the same affliction that I have. And I offer her sanctuary for the night. I know also that she's she's hungry. And I make the choice to invite her and to share with her the stuff I've got, like an addict might. That involves some danger, a minimal amount, but addicts are addicts, and but I take the risk with her. I've never been in a film which I've met so many people who have dreamt about it the next night, dreamt about my character, dreamt about the film. I think cannibalism what do you call it, a trope in storytelling? I don't know what you call it, a theme or something. I think it touches off a lot of psychological stuff. There's lots of ways that people eat other people, not just physically, isn't there? Lots of ways that society eats communities, and communities eat individuals and all that. So it's got a lot of resonance. Luca is also a very famous interior designer, which is unusual. I never met a director who's a very successful interior designer. So he works with textiles, colors, sensations. He's not just driven by ideas and stories and concepts. He's working all the time with the whole body of life, with the physical as well as other things. So that was a good clue for me. And I must say, watching the other performances too, many people I know, Michael Stuhlbarg, the two young actors playing the leads, Timothee and Taylor, myself, he's brought very sensual performances out of us. And I don't know how he did it really. It wasn't like he gave us a lot of direction as much as he encouraged things that he liked. I usually pick a film for the story. I feel like I want to believe in the story and be curious and interested in the story. Then secondly, if the character feels like something that needs me or that I could do, that I could serve that story properly, then I'll take it on. I was raised for 10 years in the Midwest, so I was excited about making a film in the Midwest. The character, yeah, of course, there's an enormous amount of stuff in the character: loneliness, self-loathing, compulsion, addiction, all kinds of very, very human and interesting things. And I suppose I also have always loved myths and fairy tales, surrealist painting, things that are not just realistic, but are real, but are kind of. My image for it is when you hit a harmonic on a guitar string, not just the solid note. You hit harmonic, and all 8 or a certain number of other notes are heard behind it. And when you have a story that is more mythological, then you get these multiple meanings, and that's what I felt reading the screenplay. So that's what attracted me to it. Timothée is a very, very conscious, graceful, eloquent young man, on that incredible path of having projected onto him that he is somehow expressing some aspect of what it is to be a young man at the moment. And that is a very, very powerful thing, you know. I don't know about America, but in England, the highest killer of young men up to the age of 25 is suicide. Young men are having a hell of a time at the moment. He said in Venice yesterday, you know, to be young is to be criticized. And man, the young men are getting it from everywhere. They're getting it from their dads, they're getting it from their mums, they're getting it from young women, they're getting it from each other, from themselves. It's a hell of a rocky road. And it's not a rocky road up, it's a rocky road down, isn't it, for down the back of a mountain. Coming down, being a young man who loved to climb trees, and often found myself easily up a tree, and then realized, oh, I'd forgotten that it's harder to climb down a tree than up. Coming down is quite a thing. So yeah, he's very committed. He knows film backwards. He's very loyal to Luca, who gave him his first job. He's a producer on this film and had a very positive effect on this film. He let things happen quite a lot, but in the edit and in what he encouraged from us. So he gave things to me like these hens, these Cornish hens that I'm feeding her, and he showed me how to flatten them, like you do if you a particular kind of way of treating a chicken or a duck or something. You flatten them down to cook them. He would give me certain things like that, a very sensual thing. That was the equivalent of him explaining what the scene was about, which is never very useful to me actually, or asking me to do specific things. He would just show me something and smile and say, "It's good, huh?" And so I'd say, "Yeah, that is good, yeah." She's brought herself to the role, you know. She just brought herself, which is, you know, I was hearing Leah Seydoux speak about that yesterday. She doesn't believe in acting, doesn't think of herself as an actress. She just brings herself. And that's a very true aspect of it, you know. Even if you change the way you speak or the way you look or the way your face moves, essentially it's still you, you know. It's still you. That's what's wanted. As much of you as possible that can be present. And she brought that very presently. You can read her thoughts in the camera very beautifully. Interestingly on set, I didn't always know what she was thinking or doing. And that was nice. And I seen her on the film, that was really nice. I'm a stage actor primarily, so I'm used to being able to really see and read, but because there's people 45 feet away or 50 feet away who needs to hear us or see us. And she was very private, as you would expect with that character. There's a lot of marriage of opposites. It's something I learned when I was working on Shakespeare when I was a young man, and I was taught by people who'd worked on Shakespeare longer than I, that if you want to be able to work on Shakespeare, you've got to learn to love opposites as much as Shakespeare does, that he'll put words like hot ice, cold fire. And it's not just the idea of those two things, but it's the sound hot ice. He puts them together, gives Romeo those words. And also the stories are constantly finding things that are completely opposed and getting them as close together as you can, like an electric generator does. And that's what makes the story explosive. So the tenderness and the moral code and the rules of these very, very violent and dangerous people is very disturbing. I think that might be why it's entering people's dreams. And even the last sequence of the film has an extraordinary marriage of opposites in the last two sequences. I won't give them away, but the marriage of tenderness and intimacy and violence and horror is very, very classical, I'd say. There's a couple of mediums that the film is touching upon: the horror medium, the love story medium, the road movie medium. And what they've done is tempered those three things very, very beautifully. So the horror is just enough that you can imagine what's going on. They've removed some of the murders, in fact, that I remember in the screenplay. They've brought the beauty of a road movie. Road road stories, travel stories are perfect for cinema, aren't they? I don't think any other medium, opera, theatre, books, paintings, no other medium can do a travel story as well as cinema. And that's very beautiful in this. And then the love story, thankfully really because of the two performers they've got, Taylor and Timothee, and what happened on the set between those two in front of the camera, that's really been given a dominance in the final edit and really favors the experience for me at least.
Yeah, Luca is, no matter how pretentious the word, is a true auteur, and he's directing from the sensibility of his cultural upbringing from his youth. And that is way different than mine, is way different than yours, and he's strong to that perspective. And he's deeply passionate, and yeah, as you said, to have, to have that fraternity with him, and also, yeah, that collaborative relationship, it's probably the greatest gift of where I am right now. I felt that cannibalism, their eating condition, I felt was a strong metaphor for, either childhood trauma or addiction or just carrying something that you can't quite make sense of or carry shame with. And I was attracted to this character of Lee because I felt he had created a delicate glass castle of himself in his expression of dyeing his hair or clothes, or the way he understood the world, or in his belief that he really had figured out how to game the system to survive with this condition. But his biggest vulnerability, like a lot of people's biggest vulnerabilities are when they spend so much time alone, is true love, is real love, is support, is care, kindness. So when he finds that with Marin, it's his greatest strength in many ways. It's the opening of the colors of the universe he has never gotten to experience, but it's also, without giving anything away, it's probably the hardest thing for him to go through, because in those moments where you're able to fall for someone else and you look more closely in the mirror, I think what he sees is terrifying. Yeah, well, they're both outsiders, and I think Lee's maybe self-stylized as an outsider being his identity, and to Marin it's new. And similar to the way Michael Stuhlbarg's character addresses Lee, it's sort of how do you put it, like a house of cards that he's built for himself. So though Marin doesn't consider herself an outsider, maybe perhaps for that very reason she's able to navigate it better, and because Lee thinks he's supposed to have it all figured out, he's maybe deluded himself in many ways, and they're great for each other, because when you're young and in love, or I've said this before, but it's you're searching for who you are in other people, almost as if they were a mirror for how you want to be, who you want to be. And I think it confirms great things for both of them, and I think particularly for Lee, it hurts in many ways too. Bones and All is a love story. It's a story that chronicles a coming of age for Marin, who's played wonderfully by Taylor Russell, but it's as much about falling in love, first love. From when we made it, when we developed the script with Luca and Dave, it was the peak of COVID, and I think something that was relevant to all of us was being isolated. Everyone in the world, that was their experience, and this idea that absent religious focus, if you have that in your life, or a strong community, which a lot of people didn't have during COVID, your reality was the story you told yourself to get by on, how to make sense of what was going on in the world. And I thought there was something very powerful in those stories of isolation. I think it's an on-the-road love movie, inspired by the likes of, and not claiming to be on the level of, but nonetheless inspired by the likes of Badlands and True Romance, and not so much of the modern twist because it takes place in the '80s, but maybe a modern sensibility of, the weight we carry now as a younger generation, and the sort of despair a lot of people live in with global warming, and there's a war in the world, there's post-pandemic, lots of stuff. The cannibalism for me was a metaphor, as I said before, for some combination of childhood trauma or addiction, or the demons that people carry in life that they can't shake and that they can't forgive themselves for not shaking. And obviously if you were confined to eating people, that would be an extremely normal thing to feel guilty about all the time. And so I think it's an effective story point in the movie. But in life, there are things that burden people that they shouldn't be burdened with, and that in love, in the safe space of love, you can work through. I think I'm most excited for audiences to experience, a story that sincerely is is zigzagged and goes in whatever direction it wants to go based on the whims of Luca Guadagnino, you know, and I think that's rare now. So Lee, we see him for the first time in a supermarket in Ohio, and Marin has been on the road for a couple of days alone for the first time, and she sees a recent mother being aggressed by a drunk man in a store, and Lee sees Marin see this happening, and and he wants to step in, maybe make a good first impression. It was a joy working with Taylor. She's an extraordinary actress. She's somebody for a number of years that I had been aware of, and she did a movie called Waves that she was amazing in. She's got a great spirit. She's open for anything, willing to try new things and scenes. And she really, obviously, if you saw the movie, brings the emotional heat it really needs, and was receptive to everything. You know, was really like a sponge. She was receptive to everything, and it was just a joy working with her. I hope we get a chance to do it again. Yeah, well, I think Mark Rylance and Michael Stuhlbarg, they bring that sense of excellency to the story, to the cast. You know, they're both, you know, highly successful actors in film and TV and theater. They have a strong relationship amongst them as well. The impossibility of love, I guess. I would say the main theme of this film is the impossibility of love.
Well, Luca's a master of references. Every single film he has seen. So he just has a lot of knowledge to pull from, and he gave me a list of movies to watch. So I watched everything he told me to multiple times. And yeah, I think he gave us a lot of freedom, but he's really good on the day of watching and making sure it's going in the right direction, and he's very spontaneous. I think he leaves the prep kind of up to the actor, but then, you know, a lot changes on the day. You shift so much, which is good, because you never know what's going to happen with him, and I love people that are like that, you know, flexible and curious. I've never read anything like the script before. I felt like I connected to her, but I didn't exactly know why at the beginning. It's just, you know, it's kind of a guttural thing at first, and so yeah, I had that connection somehow in my body with her, and she's just so unique, misunderstood, and she's an outsider, and I think, yeah, I just related to that. Well, I think she pulls him in and asks him the hard questions, and he really takes her out of her shell in so many ways. She's this, you know, sheltered kid who doesn't really know what she is. She's trying to figure it out. And he seems to have so many answers, in a way, a formula of sorts of how to live with who they are. And she's questioning all of that. So I think they're a good blend, because she kind of shakes up his routine, and he's helping guide her through adolescence, and trying to also make her feel like she can accept who she is and she doesn't need to change. I think he's one of the most unique performers alive today. And he just made me feel very safe the entire time we shot. I was obviously the newbie coming into this really special group, and yeah, he's also somebody who's so spontaneous, who's really inspired by what's happening in the moment, and you want to work with people like that because that's where you get, you know, the special little things that happen. He's very thoughtful, and yeah, he's excellent. They meet after Marin leaves home, and she's been on the road for not that long. They meet in a supermarket, and she can sense that there's something about him that she connects to, but she doesn't exactly know how she did that or why. And then once they start speaking, they know that they're made up of the same stuff. So after that, I think they both kind of have no choice but to, move through the world together in some way. Bones and All is about two kids in the 80s who are outsiders, falling in love and figuring out who they are under extreme circumstances. I mean, Andre Holland and I started filming together. He plays my dad, and I love his work so much. I've been a fan of his for a long time. He's also somebody who made me feel really safe and supported and was always checking in on me like a dad would. And he's an excellent actor. I felt lucky to share the screen with him. It's so heartfelt, so romantic, so inclusive in a way, in that, these are very misunderstood people, but it doesn't judge them at all, and it's ultimately a journey of discovery and self-discovery, which is incredibly important. And it's introspective in so many ways, but it's also fun and has a beautiful setting, and there's so many parts of it that I love. I think that people are going to be surprised by how romantic and heartfelt it is. So we always need that in the world, I think. His emotional intelligence is scary good. He could see you and he'll know exactly what's happening with you in a heartbeat without even knowing you, and you can't lie to Luca. Like you can't. So because of that, there's always a mode of finding the truth in every scene, which I admire. And I think he's singular because it could be any subject, and he's gonna, get right to the important stuff. I think he's eternally youthful, and that's a special quality to have. Mark Rylance, what is there to say? He is the epitome of craft and refinement and excellence in this artistic field, and I was so happy to just watch him, to sit and watch him prepare, and he's so great in this movie. I mean, he blew me away at every turn.
This is a story about outcasts, people who are outside the concept of society. They are not included. They kind of not even excluded. They kind of like live at the margin of the sense of the system of life. And so we had to build a logical, in the sense of the emotional logic of things, world where you had a very great commitment to the nature of these people and the worlds through which they cross their path. And the 80s as well. My motto is, when I do period movies, is always that we need to make it as if we are making a movie in that period of time, not about that period of time. I think that, first of all, it's a novel from Camille De Angelis, and that's how Dave wrote it. But I think the idea of the wanderer, the idea of the road, the being on the road, it's so connected with America, with the certain archetypes of America, the frontier, the reinvention of self, that was so strongly American. And I also love the idea that this is something happening in a period of time, the 80s, who somehow were so optimistic. Economy was booming in the Reaganomics. conflict was kind of sedated, and yet the country was more impoverished than ever. And the great conflicts were there. Let's think of the AIDS crisis, for instance. So like, I thought that the contradiction in the period was very strong about how we could visualize the internal contradictions of these characters, their quest for settlement, but at the same time the impossibility of such. It definitely is archetypical. The story is an archetypical story. Again, as I said, it's like about children being lost in the wilderness and having to find a way back home and finding that there is no such a place as home and have to reinvent the possibility of home, and again, not being able to do that. It's about the disenfranchised. In this sense, it's archetypical for that. And as I said before, it's very much in par with some idea of the travelogue, the American travelogue, in my opinion. And the second I started reading the script, I felt like, there is something about this thing that is very attractive to me. And the more I was reading, the more I felt this was something that I knew how to do it, and most importantly, it was unconsciously pulling me into it. And there was a third element that was very strong to me, that when Lee appears on the page, I felt that that character was, for me, certainly a great role for Timothy. And of course, me and Timothy, we had a great experience doing Call Me By Your Name. We have a strong bond, and I was experiencing the beautiful blooming of his wonderful path in cinema, his wonderful persona, and I felt like, oh my God, that could be a great opportunity. So at the end of the reading, I called Dave and said, listen, it's great, and I'm thinking that I could do it, and I said, I will do it only if Timothy does it. So Taylor, I wish she was a discovery of mine, but she is not. Like, she has been doing a lot of work, and I discovered her to I guess the movie that discovered her, which is Waves by Trey Schultz. She appears in the movie peripherically at the beginning in Waves, and then she becomes the protagonist of the third part, the third act, as they say. And she was extraordinary there. And then when I and Dave started to talk about the cast, I think we had different ideas. I'm not gonna speak for his ideas, but I knew I wanted Taylor. I said, I think Taylor is the only one who could do it. And I called her agent, who is a friend, and I said, can I talk to Taylor via Zoom? And we did that, and I found immediate connection with Taylor. And then, like, very few days later, I called her and said, the role is yours if you want it. So I didn't audition her. She got the role out of my knowledge of what she had done before and the fact that she really felt perfect for playing Maren. I think Bones and All is a film about the impossibility of love and the aim for finding home, but also in a way the impossibility of that dream of home. I think Timothy is a wonderful iconoclast. Timothy is a very bright, and he has the capacity of thinking of cinema, not just from the perspective of his own character, but in general from the perspective of what is the impact of the movie in itself. And so he has this capacity of understanding the semantics of his job, as well as the performance in itself. So it's beautiful because I think Timothy loves to find the challenge, to be in a risky place, like I do. So we share that for sure. Who am I? What do I want? How can I escape a sort of destiny I feel I have to carry on my shoulders? How can I find connection with someone else? How my connection with someone else is a connection because we are similar or because we are different from one another? How can I make home for myself? All these are really universal questions that are extreme questions that we can feel in our life or we can deal with in our life with different degrees of intensity and drama and extreme, a sense of extreme. Clearly in this movie, because it's a movie, we are going for the extremes because we want this universal to be very, very deep and profound. But I think, we, all of us, could definitely agree that in the search for self, we deal with a lot of extreme, complicated emotions in our life. So I hope that's the connection for an audience. It's so beautiful for me to see him growing up and really growing up as a performer. I think he is so heartbreaking, and I think everybody's heartbreaking in the movie. Timothy in particular, though, brings a sense of insecurity and of tenderness and of impossibility that are so strong. Mark Rylance is possibly one of the greatest actors alive now, and to work with him has always been something that I really wanted to. And when I and he spoke on Zoom again, the old days of meeting actors were gone then. Maybe they're coming back now, in person, I mean. But the conversation was very, very interesting because I think that Mark understood that we didn't want to make in Sully a sort of bidimensional portrait of a villain. We wanted to make, as for the rest of the characters in the movie, a three-dimensional portrait of a man who has been continuously living alone, and he's in search of a contact and a companionship. That's what we felt was important for the character. And to see Mark bringing his incredible technique and his total commitment to the character was extraordinary. I thought that was great to have proper composers to work on the soundtrack. So I went into the rockstar world again with Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, but still they are some of the most important and wonderful composers some can think in cinema composition. And the experience was amazing. We met on the phone before shooting, and I gave them a little impulse. I said, listen, because I want this to be a very deep Americana, can we think of the sound of Americana for a moment? And guitar came to mind. And I started to think of the idea of a simple articulation of a melody coming from being with your guitar by the fire in the wilderness. And that's how this very beautiful, endearing score came about, started from that. And Trent and Atticus composed these beautiful lyric, beautifully loving themes with guitar. And then they embodied that with a sort of wall of sounds that were really deep and went very dark. So the mixture of these two things is really beautiful, and it was wonderful to work with them. They're so smart and they're so for it. They go for things, and sometimes we were challenging one another, saying like, why don't we go, let's say, in a moment we go opposite to what you think you should go. So when Lee confesses something very dramatic, the music is super sweet and very, very full of love, because we are now in the position of listening to his storyline. And so we have to be open to him. We cannot be closed. Like when it's in a way, the moral position of the movie lies a lot into the music of Trent and Atticus.